About 4 years ago, when I was publishing my E-Party book and talking about the fact that we needed a third political party, there was a lot of energy in the political world around the fact that the system was dysfunctional and polarized and just not working correctly. And at the same time, there was a bunch of other groups obviously had a similar idea, and they brought their ideas to the table. The Tea Party was getting started right around then. The Tea Party decided to not become a third party, yet they decided to have people run for office. Around the exact same time, an organization called No Labels was getting started, and they had a totally different vision. They did not want to run for office. They did not want to get people elected, yet they felt they had their own kind of silver bullet to jump in and help break the dysfunction and cut through some of the polarization. So today, we're fortunate to have with us Margaret Kimbrall, who's the executive director of No Labels. We're going to learn about No Labels, how they operate, and they've been in business for 4 years now. And for those of you not familiar with No Labels, they've had an interesting amount of success, and we want to talk about that as well today, because the premise of this show is always that there are a lot of problems out there, and we want to talk about the problems, but we always want to drill down and talk about the solutions. And I think we'll learn today that No Labels has found their way to some solutions to help break the dysfunction and break the polarization. So, Margaret, welcome to None of the Above.
Steve, thanks for having me. Glad to be with you today.
And Margaret,
sorry I couldn't be in Aspen in person.
Well, next time you're out in Aspen, I told you before, send someone out from No Labels. We'd love to have them on the show.
We'll take
And
you
as
up on it.
soon as we get that private jet from syndicating the show, we'll be happy to pick you up and bring you out. So tell us briefly, what is your role with No Labels as an executive director?
So I work directly with all of the staff and all of our co-founders to really execute, the vision, what we're working on at No Labels at all different times. We're set up with a lot of different departments throughout the organization, almost like a campaign, just without a candidate. But so I work to make sure that all of the trains are running on time and smoothly, and also I work directly with all of our members on Capitol Hill, so the 94 members in our Problem Solvers Coalition, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit later. I work directly with them on the legislation and the meetings and everything that they're doing.
And is your background more organizational in nature or more political in nature, or a little of each?
I actually started really mainly on campaigns, so I did a couple senatorial and gubernatorial campaigns before getting involved and meeting a lot of the people that helped start this organization. So I'd say it's more on the political side.
So when you were introducing yourself, you used two words that maybe I'd like to investigate a little. One is you said vision. So what is the vision for No Labels?
The vision for No Labels is calling for a national strategic agenda. So we basically are calling for our leaders to come together and define what it is as Americans we can agree to and work towards. We're one of the only countries that doesn't have a national shared vision for our country. Right now we've got, when the Democrats are in power, there's a Democratic agenda, and when the Republicans are in power, there's a Republican agenda. But when are we as Americans figuring out what our shared vision is? So that's really what we're calling for, our leaders to come together and determine what those shared goals are, much like Bill Clinton and Newt Gingrich were able to do in the 90s. They agreed that they wanted to balance the budget. So therefore, having that common goal set forward, they were actually able to get something done, and they were actually able to balance the budget.
So when you say shared vision, are you talking about necessarily pushing content in terms of actually issues you want to solve, or more from a process perspective, how to work together to get problems solved within that framework?
Well, I think it could be a combination of both. I mean, right now we're talking to different networks that we've been building. Our congressional members, our thought leaders, business leaders, our citizens, our campus leaders. Talking to them about what goals they see. So, once you establish and find those goals, the policy will then flow from there. So, we're still at that point where we're figuring out, and we've just started to figure out what those shared goals will be, and from there you can come to some policy.
So somewhere back in 2010, a few people had this notion for the idea for No Labels. What if anything, was the impetus at that time? Was there a particular event that just pushed them over the edge, or was just a process of events that just led to this? How did it come about?
Really the pivotal point where, a thoughtful group of people that have been in politics, their whole lives, was the Affordable Care Act, what a lot of people refer to now as Obamacare, passing without one single Republican vote. So, I think there was a lot of trust lost at that moment that, our leaders, weren't collaborating and working together, and that legislation was passed without buy-in from both sides. So that was really the impetus that, began No Labels. And so that was the spring of 2010. And then from there, we started galvanizing citizens, finding people around the country to start giving a voice to, people that just wanted to see, our nation starting to solve problems together. So it was really the Affordable Care Act that was a launching point.
And the Affordable Care Act probably continues to be a launching point for the last 4 years. So you mentioned we. Were you part of the group that started No Labels in 2010?
Yes, I was. I was one of the original staffers, if you will.
Well, that's exciting to have gotten in on the ground floor. Very cool.
And we've made a lot of success in a very short amount of time. It is a small group of a lot of really committed people. I know I mentioned earlier, this looks like a campaign, it's kind of set up like a campaign, and we operate like a campaign. So there are, a lot of young, hungry people at the staff level that are a part of this, and we drive 7 days a week. We're on 24 hours a day. So it's a passion project, not only for the staff, but also for the volunteer leaders, our national co-chairs, our members of Congress, that really just, are driven to not accept the status quo. I mean, we have to be able to make a difference here and restore some of the trust in our government.
It's interesting you use that word campaign, and in my introduction I said part of my theory is that we need a third political party. Your group obviously decided you did not want to run for office, you did not want to be on that side of pushing those buttons, yes and no and whatever. What was the thought process in regard to deciding to be a party or not being a party?
I think we decided we have a two-party system, so that's the system we have, and we're going to try to work within it to try to restore some trust and make it work the way that it's already currently set up. So I know there are a lot of valiant efforts that are working on a lot of different things. I mean, we decided to start with some of the initiatives that were more short-term, things that could begin changing the environment in Washington, D.C., more in the short term. I mean, there's valiant efforts like, gerrymandering and money in politics and, third parties, like you said, but, those aren't the things that No Labels is going to be focused on.
And are you only focused on D.C., or have you begun to focus on aspects of politics outside D.C.?
We are just starting to build out relationships at all levels of government. So at the mayor's level, the state houses, really starting to bring those relationships into the fold and build a national network of state and local legislators and elected officials as well. So, we started first in D.C., and now we're going out into the states.
I'm glad to hear that. Obviously, the dysfunction is pervasive. It's not limited just to Washington. So if you can take your solutions nationwide, that would be great. So let's go back about to 2010 again. You're not going to be a political party. You're going to be a something. How did you get organized? How do you have like a board of directors that runs your company? What's the structure that goes about making decisions, etc.?
So we have, we started first organizing with citizens around the country. So we always knew if we ever wanted to get anything done, we first had to start at the grassroots level. So we brought together 1,000 citizens from all 50 states to our launch in New York City in December of 2010. And really, that was spearheaded by a group of co-founders like Mark McKinnon, Kiki McLean, John Avlon, lots of people in the political space. So those are really kind of our co-founders, Nancy Jacobson. So that's more of our board. I mean, we're in constant communication with them daily on phone calls, on emails. So they're really the ideas center that then the staff executes.
Okay, so you have kind of an ideas center, and I guess you have two national chairpersons?
That's right. Governor John Huntsman and Senator Joe Manchin were announced at another large citizens gathering we did with 1,300 people from all across the country, citizens, bringing them together to unveil these two new national co-chairs last January.
So is that an elective process or just kind of a consensus process?
I'd say it's kind of a consensus process.
So when your group is making a decision, we're gonna do a program. We're gonna do a Make America Work program. How does that get pulled together? Who's making those decisions? Are these 1,300 people across the nation, or 1,000 people across the nation? Are they all involved? Is it this board group you have? How do you make your how do you start with an idea and bring that through to fruition?
Sure. So we do national conference calls with our co-founders and citizens on a regular basis to talk about new initiatives, new things that we've been brainstorming, that they've been brainstorming, or hearing back in their hometowns. So we do organize with them not only on conference calls but also through email campaigns to get their input, get their ideas that could be added into any of these booklets or initiatives that we've put out in the past. So we get their buy-in every step of the way and their direction and ideas.
Yeah, I was actually on one of your national calls a couple years ago. I thought it was a fascinating process, and then but I haven't seen much in the way of internet invitations to be involved in decision making. Maybe because I'm not being active enough.
We'll get you more active.
Now, obviously, this has to cost a lot of money to bring people in across the nation and do phone calls and everything. So, how are you structured financially? You mentioned you're a campaign. Do you run campaign-like in terms of contributions? How do you fund the operation?
We are set up as a 501c4 issue advocacy group. We also do now have a foundation branch, educating people, not only members, but citizens across the country. So, we're really funded. We run on a shoestring budget. Like I said, this is a passion project. All of our co-founders, are full-time volunteers. We do have a staff of about 15. And really, this is, funded by private individuals that just really care about this country getting on the right track. I mean, it is people from all different backgrounds that are funding this, Republicans, Democrats, independents. We have a large small dollar contribution, $5, $10 here and there. But it's really, it's funded by these private individuals.
Okay, so we know how you got there and when. We know how the whole thing got started. We know how you got organized. Let's talk about some of the stuff you've done. First of all, you said you have a national strategic agenda. Can you talk a little bit more about how that works?
Sure. So in January of this year, right around the State of the Union, we launched a book calling for this national strategic agenda. This was, kind of our planting the flag, calling for this new governing process by which you would first come to agreement around a set of shared goals. We did a lot of polling, not only with our citizens, but also a national poll of randomly selected people across the country to really figure out what are the citizens like, where are people focused right now. And, to be honest with you, I mean, we thought people were going to want to go to Mars and cure Alzheimer's and cancer. I mean, big goals for the country. But what came back was, people really want to see, our government balance the budget, grow our jobs. They want to see energy self-sufficiency. They want to see, things like that. So that's where we're going to be focused. I mean, those will be some of the key points that make up this national strategic agenda. We talk to our members about it. These are the goals that they can all agree to. So they're going to begin starting working groups talking about these issues. We're bringing together leaders, thought leaders from all around the country. Like I mentioned, we're starting to talk to and identify some of our state and local leaders to speak to about this, and also the citizens are a big part of all of this. So once we identify and start working on some ideas within these goals and start getting to some consensus on both sides, from there we'll move into legislation probably next year and continue working on all of these.
Now, you've actually proposed legislation in the past, if I'm correct.
Yes, that's correct.
And how does that evolve in terms of getting people to sign off on actually promoting a package of legislation?
Sure. So in July of 2013, so this past summer, we actually had 80 of our problem solvers show up on the hottest day in July in Washington, D.C. outside, to unveil this legislative package. We again had citizens come in from all across the country for this. And we have 17 bills. There's 9 in the House, 8 in the Senate that were proposed and dropped, and they're all around government waste and inefficiencies. Really, this was also for the organization. I mean, if you bring these members of Congress, conservatives, liberals, everything in between, can they actually come to a consensus and agree and write legislation together? So, that proof of concept was really delivered with this launch of these bills. We've actually had success on several of these already. Two have been signed into law, or some version of them. 21st Century Healthcare for Heroes, which is a merger of the DoD and VA medical records. That language was adopted from our bill into the NDAA that was signed into law this past December. And then no budget, no pay. That was our original idea that we put forward. We had, over 100 co-sponsors on that. The Republican leadership adopted that, no budget, no pay, and it was signed into law by President Obama last year. So we're starting to make some movement on these legislation pieces. The one other one, biennial budgeting, our bill, Take the Time, Save the Dime, was just given a hearing in Paul Ryan's committee, the budget committee, and passed on a bipartisan markup as well. So that will head to the floor soon.
And for our viewers, and on a previous program, we've talked about the budget process. Your notion is we should do a 2-year budget, if I understand it correctly. And I think there's many states that have multi-year budgets, so that we'd be modeling after some of the states that do that.
That's correct.
So what I hear you talking about is being kind of facilitators, but then I also hear you being kind of lobbyists. Are you one or the other, or just a little bit of each?
I mean, I think it's a little bit of each. I mean, we actually have to see some movement on these bills. So, I mean, that does take time, educating people, their staff, what these bills are. A lot of that's also coming from our citizens as well. So, our citizens write their members of Congress and ask them, not only to join on in this call for a national strategic agenda, and to, join this Congressional Problem Solvers Coalition, but also to support some of these bills and ideas.
Now, I happen to be professionally a lobbyist. My viewers know this. That's what I do in my day job. And I don't think lobbyist is a bad word. So do you actually register to lobby and then officially announce yourself as a lobbyist when you're meeting with people, or do you kind of walk the line there and not take that position?
I'm officially registered as a lobbyist myself.
So you are. So when you're on the Hill, you're a lobbyist for No Labels. You're presenting the issues, and you're presenting this strategic agenda, or these 26 different pieces of legislation you've talked about.
That's correct.
So one of the things that actually usually makes legislation work or not work, and this maybe ties into your campaign notion here, is building some pressure. How do you build pressure behind you to have the congressmen and senators take what you're doing seriously?
Well, I mean, I think that's where our citizens come in. I mean, our citizens are a key component every step of the way of what we're doing. I mean, if your voters and constituents want you to legislate as a problem solver, this is the only platform that's giving a voice to that subset of voters. So, this is a way to apply pressure through the citizens, to sign on and be a part of this.
So I take it you must have some type of registration for people who want to sign up to participate in the grassroots?
We do, and thanks for mentioning that, Steve. We've got a campaign called the How We Fix It campaign, so you can go onto our website at nolabels.org and sign on to that How We Fix It campaign, which is where we are doing all of our activation around this call for a national strategic agenda. And as we move forward into the next year and throughout this year, that's really the campaign that we're going to be building.
How many people is your goal? How many people do you think you have to have organizationally to pull this off?
I mean, I think with anything, I mean, hundreds of thousands are already great. I mean, we've got about 500,000 citizens in our network right now that are active with us, and if we could grow that to 1 million, I mean, it just makes our voice that much stronger. So I think success would be 1 million people.
So we talked about process before, and one of the things you've done is you've built this Problem Solvers Coalition. You want to spend some time discussing with the viewers what this coalition is about and how it works?
So this coalition meets at least once a month, and they get together. They hear from policy experts, people.
And Margaret, let me cut you off when you say that. These are sitting congressmen and sitting senators.
That's correct.
Okay.
So it's a group of evenly divided Republican and Democrat senators and congressmen and women that meet on a regular basis. I mean, right now in Washington, D.C., there is no other venue for these guys to come together and get to know one another. There's absolutely nowhere that they can go to start building trust and relationships and just getting to know each other even at a personal level. I mean, unless they're meeting in the members' gym. So this gives them a place to start building some relationships and also start figuring out how they can work with their colleagues that they might not otherwise know across the aisle. So, we're bringing them together on a monthly basis, if not more, and we're now moving into building some working groups around these key goals that they have agreed to work on together.
So when you bring them together, is it normally to hear a speaker? Is it to actually drill down and discuss issues? What are they doing when they get together on this monthly or bi-monthly basis?
It's both. I mean, it's, talking about the bills that we currently have as a group, what the progress on those are. It's hearing from policy experts, depending on what the conversation is at that point. I mean, we will be finding the leading thinkers around the different goals that we're working on for this national strategic agenda to really, drill down and hear from experts, both Republican and Democrats. So it's a variety of different things depending on, where the conversation is with the members. So that's where we're headed, though. Talking about these 4 key areas.
And when you bring this group together and you're facilitating, however you call it, are you perceived as being a nonpartisan entity, or how are they perceiving you in your role?
I think our value is, we can organize this, right? I mean, we're set up, to be able to organize all of these members. They've got a million different things going on and pulling at their calendar all the time. So, to have the outside group be able to put an agenda together and, bring in some of the speakers that they want to hear from, follow up with the minutes and all of that organizationally, I think has been very helpful to these members.
You said you're a veteran of politics. You've done some campaign work. How do you think we got to this level where we've lost that camaraderie? We've lost that socialization that used to occur in Congress. They talk about Reagan and Tip O'Neill. Maybe they didn't like each other, but they sure could get together and drink beer together. I mean, how did we lose that? Where did that go?
I mean, I think they have a packed calendar and they're constantly in a campaign cycle. I mean, they've got their Republican caucus lunch, their Democrat caucus lunch that they meet with. They do their, committee hearings and assignments, but, a lot of it is centered around this fundraising. I mean, they're constantly fundraising around the country. So there's not a lot of opportunity right now for them to get to know each other at a personal level. They're in Washington for 3 or 4 days and then they're back to their district. So, there's not a lot of time being spent and opportunities for them to even be able to meet with people. So I think a lot of it is their calendars. I mean, they're just not here as often as they used to be.
Yeah, and that's a shame. I'm a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania, and I can't think of the woman that runs the university right now, but I know she wrote a book, and she said one of the problems is that congressmen and women used to stay over the weekend, and they'd socialize, they'd see each other outside, the halls of Congress, and they develop relationships. She said that's just been lost over the years. It doesn't exist anymore.
Right. I mean, they get to know their spouses, they get to know their children. I mean, there was a whole different level of, I don't know, I mean, just friendships that don't exist right now. But, we are making a difference. I mean, there have been so many friendships that have been built through, the efforts with No Labels, and even people that sit next to each other at the meetings, they'll get lunch later that afternoon or something. So, there are some hopeful notes of that. I mean, we always open and close all of our problem solvers meetings with an inspirational note, something personal from one of the members. That will always rotate so that everybody can get to know that member specifically on a little bit more personal level. What does this place mean to them, or what was their childhood like, something inspirational to bring along to the group. And even that has been very helpful, and just another member that may not have otherwise ever thought they had anything in common with that person that was giving the inspirational note, something will click and they'll hear something that they can then have a conversation with them about.
Yeah, I don't know how your particular organization defines success right now, and you're certainly in your toddler years, if nothing else, and I know you'll grow and you'll find levels of success. But right now, if you're just helping to break down those barriers, I think you're doing the nation a great service.
And baby steps sometimes, lead to, much bigger things. I mean, it's just like, this group trusts us now. I mean, we trust them. They're starting to trust each other. And, around the government shutdown this October, they met every single day with us at, a little Mexican restaurant right on Capitol Hill, to just have these closed doors meetings, because otherwise, they were stuck up here and no productive conversation was happening across the aisle other than in our meetings, really. So, that was very helpful. And for the senators to be able to talk to the House members, I mean, even building those relationships and friendships, there's no other place for them to do that.
Well, congratulations. So, Margaret, if any of our viewers want to become members of No Labels, part of your grassroots organization, buy a book, listen to a radio show, give us the sales pitch here in closing.
All right. Thanks, Steve. And thanks again for having me on today. We have nolabels.org. Go on to the website, sign on to our How We Fix It campaign with your email. You can tweet us at #HowWeFixIt or #NoLabelsOrg. Every Saturday from 10 to 11 Eastern Time, we're on Sirius XM POTUS Channel 124 with Governor Huntsman, one of our national co-chairs, talking about the issues and No Labels. So you can tune in there. And join us on Facebook. I mean, we're nolabels.org. Get involved in the conversation.
Well, thank you for your time today. Let us know when you're coming out to Aspen.
Thanks, Steve. I hope to be seeing you soon.
All right, all the best.
All the best. Thanks so much.